Hey guys, I'm Calluna, and welcome back to another Game of Thrones related episode of I See What You Did There. HBO's been dropping a few 10-second teasers for the upcoming 7th season of Game of Thrones, so that means the official trailer isn't that far off. But since that isn't out yet, and I'm still in a Game of Thrones mood, I wanted to do another video for you guys. So the show has a habit of cutting out a lot of characters from the books, which makes sense considering the sheer number of them that George R.R. Martin has created. The show can only be so long and include so much, so it makes sense that not everyone will be on it, even if they are really cool. However, while large portions have been omitted or radically changed, sometimes the showrunners like to take character traits or storylines from a book-only character and give them to an already established character on the show. This is done to not only reduce the number of new characters, but also a way to give characters additional development they might not have had in the books. So, I'm here to count down 10 redistributed characters, people whose storyline was in the show in some capacity, just not them. Like always, this will contain spoilers for all the current episodes of Game of Thrones, and covering all the books, including some of the Winds of Winter sample chapters. With that, let's get started. Number 10. Ilyn Payne, redistributed to Bronn. Bronn isn't nearly as developed in the books as he is on screen. After Tyrion is arrested for Joffrey's murder, he marries Lawless Stockworth, as a bribe from Cersei to prevent him as acting as Tyrion's champion in a trial by combat. Later, he names his son after Tyrion, which Cersei's not a big fan of, and tries to even have Bronn killed off due to her growing paranoia about Tyrion coming to kill her. She conspires with Bronn's sister-in-law, having Bronn's brother-in-law challenge him to a duel to try to kill him. It backfires though, since the brother loses, and it puts Bronn's wife in a stronger position of authority. Bronn never really interacts with Jaime. Instead, Jaime requests Ilyn Payne to join him on his journey to Riverrun. He has Ilyn train him to sword fight with his left hand. He does this because Ilyn not only can't speak, but he can't read or write either. So Jaime uses him as an outlet for expressing his darkest secrets, and without fear of judgment or anyone else finding out. The show replaced Ilyn for a couple reasons. For one, having Bronn and Jaime being sword bros brings some much needed levity. The way that the two of them talk with one another is really entertaining and helps break up more serious scenes. Second, the actor who played Ilyn Payne was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer in 2013, so the showrunners began phasing out his character starting in season 2. Although the character is still alive within the show's canon, his storyline of traveling with Jaime and training him to fight left-handed goes to Bronn. So in this case, this was both a character and practical choice. Ilyn Payne doesn't really do much in the story besides accompany Jaime, so it makes sense. Number 9. Willis Tyrell, redistributed to Loras Tyrell. Olenna Tyrell's anger at Cersei Lannister for killing her family line wouldn't be nearly as destructive had it occurred in the books. Loras is actually one of 3 brothers to Margaery. He has 2 older brothers, Willis and Garland. Loras, after Margaery is betrothed to Joffrey, becomes a member of the Kingsguard. If he was the only heir to Highgarden, that absolutely wouldn't have happened, since the Kingsguard give up all claims to their houses. The potential marriages that Loras faces in the show were actually supposed to be for Willis. Olenna tries to betroth Sansa to Willis, which Sansa isn't really against, since anyone would be an improvement compared to Joffrey. Okay, not that one. We get the sense that Willis is serious and stern, but compassionate towards his family, at least when Garland tells Sansa's stories about him. Since the readers haven't actually met Willis yet in the books, it makes sense that the showrunners would condense the Tyrell brothers into one character. One other interesting thing about Willis is that he is the source of the disagreement between the Tyrells and Martells. At a tourney years back, Oberyn knocked Willis from his horse and he suffered a crippling leg injury. This causes a rift between the families, though Oberyn and Willis kept up correspondence with one another and seemed to be perfectly amicable towards one another. It's never specifically stated in the show why Olenna hates the Martells so much. But the show needed a way to unite these families together, so having all the family be killed off is good incentive for cooperation. Number 8. Vargo HOAT, redistributed to Locke. There are numerous sellsword companies in the world of Song of Ice and Fire, though the show condenses a lot of them down or just outright eliminates them. The Brave Companions are one such group. They start as a group hired by Tywin Lannister to fight against Robb Stark. Vargo HOAT is their leader. He's vicious and a skilled fighter, but not terribly clever. When he sees Robb's side beginning to win the war, he turns cloak and has his group align with Roose Bolton at Harrenhal, not knowing of course Roose's plan to betray Robb. Due to previous conflicts with the Lannisters, Vargo cuts off Jaime's hand to send a message to Tywin. Brienne bites off part of Vargo's ear when he tries to rape her, which later becomes infected. When Gregor Clegane comes a-calling to take back Harrenhal, Vargo stubbornly refuses to yield the castle, left and abandoned by his men. Clegane kills him and his head is put on display. In the show, Locke takes the majority of Vargo's storyline, but instead of being a sellsword, he's one of Roose's best soldiers, and by the way he greets Ramsay, it would seem he's been in Roose's service for quite some time. Locke is far more intelligent and cunning than Vargo, who has a lisp and kind of an over-the-top, slobbery way of speaking. In fact, George R. R. Martin was the one to request the name change, since he felt that Locke was too changed from his book counterpart. The events of Locke heading up north were completely made up for the show. Locke was originally supposed to be thrown in the Bear Pit, the fate belonging to Amory Lorch in the books, but because the showrunners really enjoyed Noah Taylor's acting so much, they wrote more story to keep him in longer. Number 7. Kindly Old Man, redistributed to Jaqen H'ghar. Arya never interacts with Jaqen again after they escape from Harrenhal. When she arrives in Braavos, she meets with one of the priests of the Many-Faced God, and he tests her to see if she is worthy of becoming a faceless man. When he pulls down his hood, Arya sees a yellow skull with scraps of skin hanging from it, and a worm coming out of an eye socket. It's only an illusion, which Arya sees through, and his face then changes to that of a kindly old man, which is how he's referred to throughout the rest of the books. He becomes Arya's teacher and gives her her first kill assignment, which she does without much difficulty. This is currently where the Arya story has left off in the books, so we'll see how the kindly man behaves when she goes to the path of her TV counterpart, assuming that happens. The show did have what appears to be the kindly old man when Arya first arrives at the House of Black and White, only to have it then become Jaqen. The show does give a weird hive mind sense when it comes to the faceless men. It isn't clear if the Jaqen in Braavos is the same one Arya met at Harrenhal. He serves essentially the same purpose thus far, so it makes sense that the show brought in a familiar face for the audience. Currently, in the books, a man matching the description of Jaqen's new face is at Oldtown, and has infiltrated the Citadel for some unknown purpose. We see him interacting with Sam Tarly, so who knows if we'll get to see something similar come up in Season 7. Number 6. Cold Hands, redistributed to Benjen Stark. Many people were looking forward to meeting Cold Hands in Game of Thrones, especially after George R. R. Martin confirmed that he was not Benjen Stark, but a separate character entirely. So of course, the show ended up doing the exact opposite. They made Benjen Cold Hands, or at least gave him part of his story. When Gilly and Sam are fleeing Craster's Keep, Cold Hands saves them from a group of whites and escorts them back to the Wall. He calls Sam brother, indicating he was a member of the Night's Watch at some point before becoming a white, and was one of the reasons why fans thought it could be Benjen. However, Leaf tells us Cold Hands died a long time ago, so it can't be Benjen. After bringing Sam and Gilly back, Cold Hands escorts Bran, Hodor, Mira, and Jojen to the Three-Eyed Crow. Since he's basically a white but with a human consciousness, he isn't able to pass through the tree barrier. Bran is still currently with the Three-Eyed Crow in the books, so we have to wait until the Winds of Winter chapters to see if Cold Hands is still hanging about. Benjen basically does what Cold Hands does, though slightly backwards. He saves Bran from whites and brings Bran back to the Wall. It was cool to see him return again, and since it ultimately doesn't change Cold Hands' overall purpose as bodyguard/guide, it's a nice treat for fans who've been wondering what became of Benjen, especially since there's a good chance we really won't find out what happened to him in the books. Number 5. Jon Connington, redistributed to Jorah Mormont. So, in this case, only a small portion of a character's story got changed, though it is quite significant to the recipient. Jorah never develops grayscale in the books after rescuing Tyrion from the Stone Men. It's actually part of Jon Connington's story. Jon Connington was a friend of Prince Rhaegar's, who had been exiled by the Mad King after losing the Battle of the Bells at Stony Sept, and he joined the Golden Company, a sellsword company in Essos. Varys and Illyrio came to Jon and told him that they had spirited out Rhaegar's son, Aegon, out of King's Landing by switching him with another baby. Jon raises Aegon, going by the name Griff, and dyeing his hair blue. He does the same thing for Aegon and passes him off as his son, young Griff. So good at naming children. Tyrion is sent to Jon by Illyrio rather than Daenerys in the show. When the ship they are on is attacked by stone men, Tyrion is saved by Jon, who ends up contracting grayscale in the fight. Jon hides his affliction from his men so he can try to continue helping Aegon claim the Iron Throne. The show eliminated not only Jon, but all of the Aegon subplot. Jorah is the one who ends up getting grayscale when he and Tyrion travel through Old Valyria to Meereen, something that also doesn't happen in the books. Jorah's storyline has definitely diverged a bit from the books. He and Tyrion have not made it to Dany just yet. Jorah is still trying to do what he can for his queen. While Dany has left Meereen, he tries to convince the Second Sons to realign with her. Jorah's condition goes along with the show's more sympathetic and heroic portrayal of his character. It makes him more tragic since grayscale will kill him if he cannot find a cure. It's also a good way to either write out Jorah from the show completely, or make him prove that he truly loves Dany if he can find the cure. Number 4. Edric Storm, Redistributed to Gendry. Robert Baratheon was known to have many bastard children, and there are 2 other major bastards besides Gendry who have a part to play in the books. One is Maya Stone, Robert's first child, who lives in the Vale, who becomes a friend to Sansa when she's disguised as Littlefinger's bastard daughter. And the other is Edric Storm. Edric is the son of Delena Florent, the cousin of Stannis' wife, Selyse. He was acknowledged as Robert's bastard since his mother was noble, unlike Maya Stone, who was common-born and never acknowledged, though it's still well known by many who her father is. Edric was raised at Storm's End by Renly's Castellan, and after Stannis takes Storm's End, he sends Edric off to Dragonstone to be raised along with Shireen. It is Edric, not Gendry, that Melisandre tries to use for blood magic. She leeches Edric for the curse against the other kings, and tries to convince Stannis to sacrifice him so she can reawaken the stone dragons. Davos helps spirit Edric out before Melisandre can burn him. Overall, Gendry's role in the show plays out basically the same, and it kinda makes sense as to why the show didn't include Edric. This seems to be a common occurrence. If another established character can do the same thing without changing the overall story, that's usually what the show chooses to do. In the books, Gendry stayed with the Brotherhood without banners and even begins working as a smith at the inn at the crossroads. Brienne runs into him while searching for Sansa and is confused since Gendry resembles Renly, who also resembled a young Robert. Here's hoping that Gendry ends up tailing along with Podrick and Brienne as they make their way back up to Winterfell. Number 3. Jane Westerling, Redistributed to Talisa Magar. Talisa and Robb Stark were the Romeo and Juliet of the Game of Thrones universe. Robb had already been betrothed to another, but he fell in love with Talisa and decided to break his promise by marrying her. Unfortunately, this leads to the infamous Red Wedding, where Robb, Talisa, and their unborn child are all killed by Walder Frey's men. Talisa was a character made up for the show. Instead, a similar-ish story happens with a character named Jane Westerling. After Robb takes the Crag, a castle whose bannermen support the Lannisters, he is injured but nursed back to health by the castle lord's daughter, Jane. When Robb hears about Theon's betrayal and the supposed murder of Bran and Rickon, Jane comforts him in his grief and they have sex. Robb marries her to protect her honor, since Robb wants to be the kind of honorable man his father was. Unfortunately, this dissolves his alliance with Walder Frey. Jane's mother, Sybil, made sure to give Jane moon tea to make sure she didn't conceive a child, and knew about the plot of the Red Wedding. Jane did not attend, unlike Talisa. The excuse for why she was left behind was so that they didn't incur Walder Frey's wrath, when in reality it was due to them knowing what was to come. Jane and her family are pardoned by Tywin Lannister due to their help in the attack, though Jane was completely unaware of the plot and even mourns Robb's death. The main thing that changes with exchanging Jane for Talisa is what fatal flaw leads to the Red Wedding. The book shows that Robb taking Jane as his wife is him being honorable like his father. Even though he was betrothed to Walder's daughter, he doesn't want to besmirch Jane's name. Just as Eddard's honorable nature led to his demise, so too does his son's. Talisa, on the other hand, is a love-at-first-sight story, and a way to show that Robb is thinking more with his heart than his head, a total opposite of his book counterpart. I've talked about this quite a bit in my Robb Stark analysis video, so check that out if you want more details. In the books, Jane is currently under supervision due to her love for Robb and the possibility of her faking a pregnancy with his child. Talisa's murder in the show seems to hint that that's probably not going to happen, though. Number 2. Jane Poole, Redistributed to Sansa Stark. We do see Jane briefly in the first episode as she is chatting with Sansa. Jane Poole is Sansa's best friend, and in the books, her and her father accompany Ned Stark to King's Landing. Her father is the Steward of Winterfell, Vayon Poole. Her father is killed after Ned is captured and thrown in the Black Cells, and Jane is given to Littlefinger. He sends her to Winterfell, claiming she is Arya Stark and using her to secure an alliance with the Boltons. She marries Ramsay, who has been legitimized by Roose as his trueborn son and heir. Only a few people know she isn't really Arya, which is why Theon is chosen to give her away to Ramsay at the wedding. It's another way to make everyone think she's Arya. Ramsay is just as cruel in the books as he is on the show. Jane's cries can be heard from the tower which she is confined to. Eventually, Theon helps her escape by jumping off the walls into the large piles of snow below, and they end up being brought to Stannis Baratheon's camp. So in the show, they decided to give the marriage plot to Sansa, which is one of my least favorite decisions in the show. Sansa is still in the Vale, and Littlefinger does plan to marry her off to someone, Harry Harding, the next heir to the Vale after Sweet Robin. We don't really know much about Harry, so it's possible a similar scenario could occur, though I doubt it. The way the Winds of Winter chapter paints Sansa, it's more of an opportunity for Sansa to begin to really play the Game of Thrones, learning how to charm Harry in order to get what she wants. Ramsay is able to get away with torturing Jane because he knows she isn't the real Arya. Jane has no family, no wealth, nothing but the pretending to be Arya to keep her alive. Having Ramsay marry an actual Stark girl takes away some of that, especially since Sansa has allies in the Vale. All it takes is one messenger to send the full force of the Vale down to Winterfell. The show wanted to really villainize Ramsay so we'd feel good once the guy got killed. At this point in the books, though, he is still alive, so we have yet to see just who is the lucky bastard who gets to kill him. It's probably Jon Snow, though. Number 1. Arianne Martell, redistributed to Ellaria Sand. The majority of the Dornish characters got gypped when it comes to the show's story. There is an extensive and elaborate plot going on in Dorne, and it involves several groups vying against each other. Prince Doran, the heir of Sunspear, has 2 other children older than Trystane, the prince seen in the show. A son, Prince Quentyn, and his eldest child and heir, Princess Arianne. In Dorne, whoever is the eldest child will inherit, regardless of gender. Arianne, therefore, will be the one to inherit. When Oberyn is killed by Gregor Clegane, Arianne is angry at Doran for not going to war against the Iron Throne. Arianne attempts a coup by using Princess Myrcella as a means of rallying troops. According to Dornish law, she argues Myrcella should be crowned queen, not her younger brother Tommen. Doran finds out about this coup and contains it, though in the fight Myrcella is disfigured, losing one of her ears. After imprisoning Arianne and the Sand Snakes who helped her, Doran eventually reveals to her that he had a secret plan all along that he had been planning to act on. He merely put on airs of compliance when it came to the Lannisters. Apparently, there'd been a secret marriage pact for Arianne to marry Viserys Targaryen. Since Doran's sister Elia had been killed, Doran had strongly aligned with the Targaryens. Unfortunately, Viserys was killed by Khal Drogo, so he sent Quentyn to seek out Daenerys in an attempt to renew the pact. The Dornish plot is complicated and can take quite a while to get through, so let me just summarize by saying that Arianne, once she's made aware of Doran's plan, allies with him and convinces the Sand Snakes to follow her lead. So in the show, most of the Dornish plot got erased, leaving in only a few parts that were convenient to the show. Doran only has Trystane. Quentyn and Arianne are never mentioned or seen. Some of the Sand Snakes are present, not all of them, which makes sense since quite a number of them are young children. And they do want to get revenge for their father. However, it isn't Arianne who leads them, but Ellaria. She is angry Doran never seeks justice for Oberyn's death, and she stages a coup with the Sand Snakes to kill Myrcella to send a message to the Lannisters. Jaime and Bronn stop them, and they are all arrested. Jaime sails back to King's Landing with Trystane and Myrcella, but not before Ellaria poisons Myrcella with a delayed poison, killing her. When Doran finds out, Ellaria and Tyene manage to take out Doran and his bodyguard, Hoda. Ellaria assumes control of the throne, and later aligns with Olenna to support Daenerys' claim to the Iron Throne. The changes made to the Dornish characters are some of the most drastic and upsetting to book readers. It's full of a lot of political intrigue, and while it might not all be crazy sword fights and sex, it's still interesting, and there's a lot of really fascinating rabbit holes one could fall into while analyzing the Dornish plot. By giving Ellaria Arianne's storyline, it makes Ellaria only focused on revenge and not all that interesting of a character. Arianne's motivations are much more complicated and aren't focused on the spilling of blood, but more on the usurping of power. Ellaria in the book doesn't want any unnecessary bloodshed. All of the people involved in Elia's death are dead by that point. Robert Baratheon, Tywin Lannister, Gregor Clegane, and Amory Lorch. She wants what is best for her daughters, and is much more compassionate and level-headed. Arianne is currently investigating young Griff, and whether or not his claim to be Aegon is true. But, like I mentioned earlier, that was all cut from the show, and so the majority of the Dornish characters aren't given much to work with. For this redistribution, this was another one where the showrunners did a bit of picking and choosing when it came to what storylines they wanted to focus on. Season 6 in particular showed a lot of women taking back power. Cersei, Alleria, Sansa, and Dany all share this quality. It's just a bit too bad that most of it focuses on destructive power, or killing in general. Arianne is one of the most cunning and intelligent characters in the books, and I would have really liked to see more of the women outsmarting men rather than just outright killing them. In any case, her legacy is left to Alleria in the show, and with all those forces gathering to help Daenerys, we'll see if this group can unite to take the throne. So, those are 10 characters who, while they may not be in the show proper, still have their stories told in some capacity throughout the episodes. Now, I know I left some off this list, specifically because at this point in time we haven't seen them fully embrace other characters' stories, so don't get mad that I didn't include Arya possibly becoming a version of Lady Stoneheart on here. We still have Season 7 and 8 to get through to see if that actually happens. Are there any other characters on this list that you think should have been included? What characters do you think we might see in the coming seasons, either as themselves or through a redistributed character? Post your thoughts and comments below. Okay, I'm Calluna, and thanks for tuning in to another Game of Thrones video. I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye!
Geek Vision.